Hello everyone, Ace here, and today I've decided to talk about that diversity tool that has been shown off by Blizzard, and why I believe even the social justice crowd are trying to distance themselves from it, even though it is ironically very specifically a product of their ideology. Now, for those of you who are not aware, the diversity tool is basically a graph that shows how progressively diverse your character is based on various characteristics, such as race, age, etc., etc. with the goal being to have as many points as far away from center as possible, so you can get your diversity level over 9,000. Now, if you're sitting there thinking that this particular tool is highly disgusting over the fact that it reduces characters to just points on a graph over things that aren't even character traits, then congratulations, you are 100% correct. What may not be quite as obvious, however, is the fact that this is simply a latest part of the trend of social justice and intersectionality, reducing individual human beings to merely being parts of a group, and judging them as parts of a group, rather than judging them as individuals, i.e. by the content of their character. In fact, Blizzard's diversity tool itself is very clearly based on the so-called Wheel of Privilege that has been promoted since at least 2020 by groups including the Canadian government. You can even see the Canadian government listing Intersectionality 101 as a source on their page that shows this very graph. So as you can see, this is very specifically linked to intersectionality and the ideology of social justice. And despite the claims of the SJWs, isn't just corporate culture trying to cater to the woke crowd as lazily as possible, although that is still at least a part of it. But we can go even further back than 2020 as well, as if you decide to look at, for example, the check your privilege tests, such as, for example, this one from BuzzFeed from 2014, you'll note that they tend to cover questions regarding certain themes, such as race or sexual orientation, and so a visual representation of this test would be pretty much the Wheel of Privilege as well. So yes, Blizzard's diversity tool is not actually new, but instead is the latest example of intersectionality in action, utilizing a graph that has already existed for years, which itself is merely the visual manifestation of the check your privilege tests that have existed for even longer. And all of these are very specifically products of social justice and intersectionality. So with all of this in mind, you may now be wondering why exactly the social justice crowd would be condemning Blizzard for this when it is what their ideology ultimately promotes. And I believe the answer is because it is too honest. It shows exactly the moral character of the SJW, and they hate the fact that it exposes them for being massive bigots. Of course, for anyone who has been involved in the culture war for a while, this isn't exactly a surprise, as far leftists have been spending the past few years making arguments such as, for example, suggesting that black people are all orcs from D&D. And yes, for those who don't know, that is an actual far leftist position. So much so that the perpetually offended whiny bigots of the far left even forced Wizards of the Coast to change the description of orcs. Now, to me, and I believe to most people, this would be an even more extreme example than the diversity tool itself. However, it is important to once again remember that the diversity tool is very specifically built upon the Wheel of Privilege, and so it becomes significantly harder for SJWs to ignore that connection, as they now can't just pretend that their ideology that judges people by the skin of their color rather than the content of the character had nothing to do with, for example, the aforementioned orc controversy. They can't just argue in bad faith that this is merely the work of a few extremists, in order to ignore the fundamental reality that this is a product of the ideology itself. That isn't to say that the SJWs aren't trying to distance themselves from the diversity tool, they most certainly are. However, the best answer is to counter this attempt at distancing by bringing up the very clear and obvious origins of the diversity tool, which are undeniably linked to intersectionality. Basically, all of this is to say once again that the reason that the SJWs hate the diversity tool is because it's too honest, which means it gives people such as myself an excellent example to expose their ideology for what it truly is. Now, for those curious, I will of course be leaving links in the description below to both the Wheel of Privilege article from the Canadian government, as well as the privilege checklist from BuzzFeed, so you can check them out on your own if you so desire. But in any case, this has been Ace. Hope to see you guys again soon. Take care. Ace out.